So if we take a look at what your instructional steps would be, and again, without worrying quite about how to write them, but more about what actually is done with the people,
Right.
that
Okay.
is
So let's
right. That's kind of where I
so let me
think
draw your
you're at.
attention back to the actual book then,
Mm-hmm.
if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Right near the beginning, my introduction. It's just 2 pages long. It's super short. I have a longer version in the Core Complete book, but if you would maybe just look over those 2 pages. This is about the how, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, give me just a
Kind
second.
of stance.
What I'm seeing is explanation.
Yes, this is
Right.
intro.
Mm-hmm. And so
Um,
there, which is fine. And it's explanation. Or it's orients people. It's like this and not like that. It has this purpose. And so forth. Which isn't the
I think
same.
if your game is trying to do anything that Dungeons and Dragons doesn't try to do, then you need to get that clear right away.
No, I'm with you. But the issue here, but again, now we're talking about textual organization. I want to know,
Yeah.
or rather, I think that the consult would be the most effective for you if we open up this door of saying with real people and with the goal of actually playing today, which often means never mind all the options, just what are we doing right now. It's kind of like when somebody says, well, I've got this fantasy role-playing game, Ron. There are 7 realms. And I'm like, okay, 7 realms, whoop-de-doo. Can we play in the good one?
Hmm.
Can we just pick a good one and we'll start playing? And so I think that's kind of where I'm at with this. I'm in term not on, and again, I'm not critiquing the text. I'm talking about what we need to talk about. What I think is the most useful thing for you to talk about is to say, instead of explaining all the options and instead of explaining what it's not, granted, there's a certain amount of orientation, but what is the minimum, punchiest, most effective orientation, not the most complete one, that you talk about if we just put our butts in the chairs and you have as your priority getting to play? What is it that people need to hear? Do they really need things? Well, that's another problem with explanations. Anybody can claim anything, right? I can tell you, oh, this is nothing
Right.
like, that role playing. It's nothing like this role playing game. It's nothing like this other role playing. It's totally new or totally different. Or just to pick another popular example from this day and age, I could say, at this table, it's a safe space here. Anybody can say any of these things, doesn't make them
Right.
true,
Right.
right? So let's kind of get past claiming what it's about to be like, truthful as it
Right.
may
And
be.
and
What do we do?
and by the way, not for now, but for a little further down the road, I just wanted to put a pin in this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can be saying those things and be absolutely honest about it, like saying
Well,
this is a safe
sincere,
space or whatever.
right? Mm-hmm.
You can be absolutely sincere and telling the truth, but it turns out that what you're actually describing is the way you do it
Right, right.
because you're making assumptions about ethic or something
Mm-hmm.
that are not automatic.
Absolutely. And so, yes,
As you
sincerity is
know,
the enemy.
uh, a lot of
Authenticity is different.
a
Yeah.
lot of narrativist a lot of narrativist games can make a lot of assumptions about things like narrative arc,
Mm-hmm.
fiction structure, theme, that go completely unstated, and then it may become ugly when two
Mm-hmm.
people have been interpreting it differently the whole time. Right?
Well, all of this is very true. One can point to almost any purpose in role playing where this goes badly awry. Um, and we
And
can
there's
talk
that
about this
fuzzy
in.
line between like teaching you how to approach this game, which it's the fuzzy parts, right? The artistic parts, the facilitatory, is that a word? The facilitatory parts.
Right.
The
We
the
can,
part
right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in order to convey that to someone else, I'm putting a lot of very abstract power and ideas in their heads and hands. And it's possible that if they're like the evil GM or someone with a psychological issue, a sociopath or whatever,
or
they
just a
could
control
actually
freak,
do a
right?
lot of
Hmm.
they could do a lot of harm,
Right.
right? They could do a lot of bad shit with this.
Well, no, all of that is
So I
true.
do think it's necessary. I do think it's necessary to inject, in tone and little exclamation points and cute phrases, but just really, this is stuff that you can't nail down. If you tell someone, this is how I want you to behave, it's not going to work.
Well, I agree with
I
you about
find
this,
this
but also it is right.
something that Vincent did very badly was organize the pedagogy of Apocalypse World. Very bad. One of the worst organized books I've ever seen in my life. But when it comes to soaking you in the feeling of what he wants you to feel like when you're GMing, perfect job. Okay? So he went for tone
Hmm.
instead of
Hmm. Now, in the
step by
case, right, which is kind of interesting too, because I have often found that playing Apocalypse World was very much different from anything that I perceived from the text or indeed from Vincent. But the
yeah.
but the thing that I want, so we can, again, fascinating thing to talk about. But right now, let's talk in terms perhaps of inspiration. That would be the the key of what you're talking about, because you can inspire a person who is attuned enough. You can't, let's go back to something you just said, which is completely correct. You cannot, there is nothing you can do, not even with all of your tone, your exclamation points, all of your stylistic things you've talked about. There's nothing you can do to make a disinclined person inclined to do this thing, right? You cannot actually say, you like I say, you can put in like all the safe words and all the X cards or whatever other bullshit you want, and it's not going to make somebody a good person at the table if they're a bad person at the table. It's not going
Yeah.
to. It's not. They have to be inclined. They have to be inspired in some fashion, and inspiration means that there's something there to reach. So let's assume from the start that we're not trying to do outreach way out into the void toward people who are just not inclined to do this at all. The best we can do in that regard is to inspire people who would like to do it and aren't too sure how, or maybe have not even quite articulated it for themselves, but they will hear it once they see it, right? Or they'll go, oh, or they'll try. Um, let's have those be the most difficult people that we're talking about. Bring it in a little closer, and you find somebody who reads it and goes, oh, this is great. I can do this. I'm on it. And they happen to be right. Okay, so let's assume that we're talking to those people. They're they're
Okay.
ready to get exactly how to do it because they don't have to be convinced, or they are inspired even when they're not quite sure how, because they are creatively in tune, however they may have been mistrained or however they may have been um, unfamiliar with the possibility of doing it before. So again, let's let's
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
quit trying to
And when I
correct.
think
Let's
about
let's
what you
stop trying to correct the yahoos, right? Let's focus on your people for this.
Okay, I hear you, and I can see that I've done a little bit of what you're talking about in here, and part of it also this introduction. It is very short. It's a very small book, but it's also a little bit of a sales pitch. I'm still in sales pitch mode, and maybe that's a problem. Now, if I was a more visual person, I'm not. I'm mostly aphantasic, but so what I am is a very wordy, semantic, cerebral person, and it comes out. This is why I write long paragraphs of shit. Okay, but I'm also an
I'm
editor,
fond
and
of
I
those
I
myself.
am good
Great.
at
Hmm.
and I'm pretty good at crunching shit down. As I told you, the original version of this introduction is several pages longer.
Hmm.
For micro, I really did edit it way
Hmm.
down. But if I was a more visual person, I think of the way that, oh, maybe Inspectors or Primetime Adventures was laid out, and that there would once in a while just be like a big, punchy headline font call out in a
Right,
cartoon balloon.
right.
And like that, that's all you needed. Like I took 200 words to say that,
Hmm.
and he did it in one cartoon balloon,
Hmm.
right?
Well, I
Yeah,
hear you
that would be
about
great.
all of that, but again, we are really still, boy, it's so easy to get sucked back into what the book looks like. Let's go back to pure and simple process of if you were at a table with some people, and let's just take it as a given that they are ready, able, and willing. They just don't know how for your game, but they're ready, able, and willing. You don't have to course correct them. You don't have to, uh, make comparisons. You don't have to. You don't have to really suffer over their. I mean, there's going to be a learning curve. We're going to say, take it as a given, there are going to be mistakes. They
Yeah, but
just
I'm
will be,
jumping right
right?
into character.
Mhm.
Character generation is the next page. This is it.
Right,
You
I
got
know.
2 pages of introduction,
Well,
and it's
yes,
boom.
never mind the book. We're talking about now. We're talking about as I want us to think about people at a play space rather
Okay,
than
I hear
anybody
you.
reading a book. So you're there, you're the one who knows the game. Let's say you're not even the author. I don't care if you're the author or not, but you know the game and you want to play it. And they are looking at you kind of expectantly. Not like baby birds give us, the food. They're more like, so what do we do? They're like, fellow practitioners, ready to go. You need a group. It's like a band, right? I mean, you can be a solo artist, I guess, but
Yeah.
you need a band. And the musicians are there, and somebody's, going. So to some extent, someone says, "Oh, I think this is a bass, right? I'll play the bass." Another person is saying, "What's this one?" Right? Or another person is saying, just holding back and is not even sure. Are we making music? Are we going to do a painting? What's going on? So there you
Yeah.
are in this state where the last thing they need is a contextual explanation. It's the last thing they need. What they need is simply what to do. And again, I know your book may be beautifully laid
Yeah.
out for this purpose. I don't care right now for this conversation. I
No,
want to
you're right.
know
It's that
as we talk.
pedagogical three things at one time problem because
Yeah.
I'm again and the separate books problem because I do want to speak to those players right away,
Mhm.
but unfortunately I also have a need to speak to the GM who has downloaded this PDF and already owns 250 other PDFs, and I need to convince him in the first 2 pages that he really wants to try running this one.
Let's say you've already done that. Let's say they just
Okay.
read those 2 pages. Let's say this GM, insofar as they can get it before doing it, has gone that far.
Okay.
They just aren't, they haven't done it. And that's what I mean by the learning curve. So for
And
my
that's what I mean by
purposes,
sales mode, right? Because you can see I'm still in sales
I
mode
do, I
here.
do. Let's just put that aside. Let's get to the point where we do have somebody who goes, I think I get it. This sounds like it'll be
Okay.
good. It's in tune with what I'm talking about. And besides, this guy's inspired me with his, science fiction with its confrontational aspects. Let's not forget the role of being inspired by content. All right. Let's say that they have been felt inspired by content. And generic game or not, there's
Uh,
something which has mentioned or displayed some kind of content that they found appealing. So
okay.
they've got that inspiration on that aesthetic level to whatever small extent. They've got your summary of what kind of game it is. And they're like, I want to do that. And either they're very skilled with this kind of thing and just want to see how to do it this time, or they're not skilled with this kind of thing and would like to learn by doing. And that's the state that your GM is in. And now let's say that all the other players are in exactly the same state. They're ready, able, and willing. They don't really know what to do first or how to do it. I mean, they just for this
Okay.
game.
Uh-huh.
So what I mean, I'm not interrogating you demanding an answer. I'm going to lay out the questions that, it's kind of like teaching someone to make a sandwich, right? Pick up your pencil. What's a pencil? Okay, the pencil is this thing here. Whatever level, you're going to have to do it in this instructional way, whereby it is, or rather, I'm asking you to think in this instructional way. And the only way to go is think of yourself actually doing it. What do you say? What do you tell people, particularly after you've done all the explaining and convincing? You've talked yourself blue in the face, explaining and convincing. And
Yeah.
now, here we go. And
No, I get it.
let's
I'm at that point, right?
mm-hmm,
I've got players who are also GMs,
mm-hmm,
and some of them I've got a campaign that's been going on 4 years, very familiar with the way the system works, and have now begun running core games themselves with other groups of players,
mm-hmm,
sometimes with and sometimes without me. And what I find when I watch, so I am at that point. Okay, I've got the people who are not only bought into playing, but now they've bought into GMing.
mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I'm at, and they're at the point that you describe. Now, I want, obviously I want lots more people to be at that point. But I'm at that point with these guys, and so when I'm writing the book, I am picturing talking to them.
Right. This is a very good idea. But before we write the book, let's talk about what will be written. That's what I think the
Yeah.
console is going to be valuable for. Is that therefore the act of writing will be much more a matter of finding exactly the right words, right? But I want to talk about where we get before that when you say what is going to be written. So you're not going to write the beautiful paragraph of exactly how the dude, for a novel, exactly how the guy, stabs the king, having just discussed Hamlet with my son, whatever. But
Mm.
instead doesn't know that the king is going to get stabbed, and then the guy says, "Well, you know what? I'm going to have him stab the king." I want to be there. Well, content. We're going to say, what's the content of how you're going to be teaching or how you're going to be playing um, through doing. So let's back it up here. Let's say I'm,
I think I
at this
do. Yeah,
table.
I do need to start with something positional though. If you look
Mm-hmm,
at the introduction page, paragraph 3,
mm-hmm,
maybe the most important paragraph here, but you don't know really what I mean yet. But this is the most important paragraph here, especially for you, Ron Edwards, because you know what I'm saying about all the.
okay.
Basically, I'm talking about narrativism. Think
Right,
about the
right.
pool.
Mm-hmm,
Think about the flexibility of narrative at the moment the dice hit the table.
mm-hmm,
That's the kind of approach that we're talking. So you know what I'm
right.
talking about. But here's what's particular about my approach here. Paragraph 3. If we use a television series as a metaphor, the PCs are the protagonists of the show. Blah, 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 okay, but it's the writer's room is my metaphor here. So right off the bat, I let the players know you're a writer in the writer's room. The
Right.
GM is the showrunner.
Sure.
Okay, there's
Lots and lots
authoritative,
of right. Mm-hmm,
positional, and also responsibility. So by calling you a writer instead of a player, I've sort of put you in author stance, and then I spend the whole rest of the book talking about enforcing experience from a GM's
right.
position, because I
So
give the
right.
player the responsibility of a writer, and then I fucking make them forget it by immersing them in mood.
I know what you mean, right? But now let's talk about me as a potential player. I mean, as a person sitting there about to play. I may, put up my hand and say, yes, 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 and double yes. What now do I do? Quit talking about how it feels and what it's for. In order to play, who has to do what first? What is that? Who has to do what first in order for play to occur in this game? Because the answer is different for almost every game.
No, there's multiple answers for every game because that question is asked of different people at different states.
So, example, for this game right now, the one we're about to play,
Well,
again, never mind
the
7 rounds,
easiest,
pick one.
yeah, but the easiest distinction to point at is the one between GM and player. The first thing I want to say to a GM is not the first thing that I want to say to a player.
Sure.
So right off the bat, you've got
No, I
tension.
got that. But just tell me then, what's the first thing the GM actually does in the course of play? Whether is it a preparation step or not? What is it?
This approach, I can fucking bury you in shit you don't want to read. But core is broad. When I say fudge, I mean it. So I want you to think about fudge with a little bit of the flexibility of archipelago or the pool thrown on top. Okay,
Keep going.
that's what I'm looking at here. And because it's that generic, it's not only is it genre agnostic, but it's actually approach agnostic.
Sure.
You may take core and bolt it onto a off-the-shelf module, or you may take core and prep a linear story, or you may take core and sit down with your players and go, let's brainstorm up the thing like we do in Archipelago. You could, and then the same mechanics will underlie all of those experiences.
So again,
But I don't,
right?
unlike Primetime Adventures or Inspectors, I don't actually have a particular thing that I could tell you, here's the first thing you do when you begin actively playing. Because actually, it's a question.
Now,
It depends
what
on how
I
the
should
GM wants to use it.
in that okay, then that means we step backwards. And we say again, I didn't say what's the first thing we do as we start playing. I said what's the first thing we do so that we can play.